Hello everyone, I welcome you all to this lecture. In this lecture, I'm going to introduce the term clock. What is clock? Why do we require clock? Before this lecture, we have talked about the latches. So how latches are different from the flip-flop that I already told you. So a latch and a flip-flop, they are different because latches are not controlled. In case the output of latch unintentionally will be changed, in that case the output will be immediately modified. But in case of flip-flop, the output or the behavior of the flip-flop will be controlled with the help of a clock. So how do we pass the clock and what is clock exactly? It is a type of signal you consider. So let me draw the clock like. Clock will have some of the things like, I simply draw clock something like this. Then let's say it is high after some point in time. For some period of time it is high, then it is low, then for some period of time it is low, then again it is high. So it is a kind of signal. Because this is a signal, it will have a frequency, it will have the time period, and so on. So let's say this is the clock. Now such kind of clock we pass to the latch, and the latch start behaving like a flip-flop. So let's say this is a flip-flop, which I am assuming like it is RS. So these two are input lines, and there are output like Q bar, and we pass the clock here. We pass the clock here, right? So this clock regulate the behavior of this flip-flop. So unintentionally, the generated output should not be modified. So let's say this is R and this is S. Now in this clock, there are a few things we need to remember, that the clock has a time period. So a signal is low and then high, and again the same thing start repeating. So again this signal is this. So this will be treated as a time period of this clock, let's say T. Okay. Now in a particular interval of time, how many such signals are being generated, that will decide the frequency of the clock. So frequency and time period will be reciprocal to each other. That also very easy to understand. Now once we pass the clock, the circuit will be enabled. So there are two types of generally triggering method we use to trigger this flip-flop. I'm writing this is flip-flop. So One we consider as edge triggering, another we consider level triggering. So the meaning is, once the clock is high, let's say from here the clock is high, and then again here the clock is high, again it is high here. So in this period of time interval, the flip-flop will be enabled. So in case the flip-flop is enabled or implemented like that, it is getting enabled when the clock pulse is high, then it is level triggered. But in case your flip-flop is getting triggered when your pulse is reaching to high, from low to high, so these positions, when it is going from low to high, then your flip-flop is getting high or enabled, and in that case such flip-flop we consider as edge triggered flip-flop. Okay, right? So later on we will solve some of the problems once we will study SR and other JK flip-flop. There is one more thing which we need to know in this. So there are three terms I am saying. One is clock, another is frequency. Frequency is just reciprocal to the time period. And then another thing is duty cycle, which you need to know. So what is exactly the duty cycle? For a clock, the duty cycle is the time period in which the clock was high. So let's say if you assume this particular clock, in this clock, so if I am assuming, let's say from this point to this point, the overall time is, let's say, t, but in this particular t interval of time the clock was high for just 50% of the time. So the duty cycle is when the clock is high time of the clock, you can say. So when the clock was high, divided by, so I'm saying high clock time divided by total time. So this we consider as the duty cycle, and in this case the duty cycle is of 50% because half of the time it was high, right? So please do remember, clock is a signal which goes from low to high, high to low, and so on, which is having a time period and the frequency, and you can calculate the duty cycle for it. There can be two types of flip-flop we can design: one edge triggered flip-flop and level triggered flip-flop. So I'm ending this lecture. In next lecture we'll be talking about SR flip-flop. Thank you.